So my name is Julie Butler. I am the Preservation Director for Durable Restoration and Durable Slate. I'm also a Senior Project Manager for our more historic projects here in the Mid-Atlantic region and in other locations as well. Here at Annaburg Manor, since the city has purchased this building, the focus has been on rehabilitating it for community use. And that's really what our focus has been with any of the work that we've done. Preservation would have simply kept the building as it was and stopped deterioration. And while we've done a good deal of that, we are also changing some things back. So that's looking at more of a rehabilitation rather than a restoration or preservation of the building. So a rehabilitation means that we are making sure that anything that we do is historically accurate, but also making sure that nothing is being destroyed any further, that nothing is deteriorating any further. So that's really part of the reason that we want to remove the paint from this building, simply because originally it didn't have the paint, but also so that the building can breathe. And that is so important because the paint is really sealing off that facade and causing moisture infiltration to stay within the building and ultimately deteriorate the masonry throughout the structure. So this is a really great thing. I mean, masonry should never be painted. It can be coated with mineral paints, which become part of the masonry and have vapor permeability, or it allows moisture out. However, paint is almost impossible to get off. Masonry coatings is almost impossible to get off. So in this case here, we are using a chemical method. So basically we're applying a paint stripper of sorts. We're letting it dwell so that it softens that paint and starts to lift it. And then we are hand scraping with soft tools to remove that paint off without harming the masonry. Anything more will bring harm to the masonry. So if we were to do something like needle scaling, pressure washing, all those things can remove the paint. But with that, it actually also removes the top layer of the masonry, whether that be stone or brick. A brick has typically a hard-fired surface. If you remove that skin, then it actually becomes far less strong. It actually loses a lot of its integrity and will deteriorate as time goes on. So the way that we're doing here removes just the paint, none of the masonry, doesn't harm the masonry, and that's really, really important. And on some of the brownstone, unfortunately, there's no way to remove it all. In fact, on the brownstone and the brick, there's no way to remove it 100% without damaging either of those materials. However, we will be recoating the brownstone with a mineral coating that will actually consolidate it just a little bit and also protect it from the elements, since that is actually in the worst shape. The brick, incidentally, hasn't suffered quite as much yet, and now that it's actually breathing, it will kind of go back to its old functionality now that we've removed the paint. A really great validation that we've had here at Annaburg has been that as we remove those outer layers of paint on the brick, we've actually seen the building breathe. And the way that we've seen that happen, I know it seems impossible that a building would breathe, but it really is. So we removed the paint, and then the next day we would show up to the job site and we would see something called efflorescence on the building. So efflorescence is essentially powdery white salts. There was a haze of white powder, and in some cases it's actually quite built up. It's really fluffy. And it's very easy to clean off when it's in this really young stage, but that is moisture leaving the building. So as moisture escapes the brick and evaporates up, salts are actually left on the surface that were previously in the moisture, since the salts aren't getting evaporated. So we clean those up, and it really is a testament to the rehabilitation work that we're doing here, because the building is releasing that moisture. Moisture, of course, can get into a building in many different ways, whether it be from the roof leaks, kind of really any sort of tiny little leak, or also simply from the humidity inside the building. Moisture has to leave. So you have to make sure you give it a way to leave. And when you put paint on the exterior of a building, you actually stop that process. You make it so that the moisture can't escape. and it builds up instead. And as it builds up, it does deteriorate. So as long as you have a flow of moisture out, then you're not letting it build up and it's not going to deteriorate your building. Paint halts that, and we really want to make sure that we remove the paint so that that relationship, that process can begin once again. Paint on buildings. I'm sure everyone's thinking to themselves, well, I've seen plenty of brick buildings painted. And while that is true, a lot of people have made that mistake. It is fine to paint modern brick. Modern brick can take it, and it has kind of a different relationship with the paint. But historic brick is different. It's not as hard, it's a bit softer, and it's older, of course. So it doesn't take paint, paint will ruin the relationship that the brick has with the building and with the exterior. Buildings have been painted, and it's simply because they didn't know that it was so bad for the masonry. It takes years to see this deterioration happen. And so once the preservation movement really started getting a foothold in the United States, late 70s, early 80s, that's when we started really making it known, preservationists started making it known, paint on masonry is really, really bad and you really shouldn't do it. But of course, getting that out to everyone widely is super difficult. So while I think if you're a historic homeowner or you work for the architectural review board of your city or you work somehow within the historic preservation industry, you might be very well aware you should never paint masonry, you should never paint brick. But if you're just a regular person, you might have no clue, and that's fine. So people have made that mistake for many, many years. And what we're doing here is really just trying to reverse that, reverse the damage and reverse the issues that you see with painted brick. It's been painted, this building was painted probably because the Victorian dark style that it had when it was built fell out of trendiness, right? It wasn't trendy anymore to have these dark buildings. You move into the 1900s and people want light, they want clean cut, they don't want lots of detail, certainly not the flowery detail that we have here. And so, it'll get a paint job. Plus maybe at that point it's starting to look a little worse for the wear. Hey, we're gonna paint this cornice, so let's paint, this too to match it. And as time goes on, this building was painted white. It has gone through many transformations, many additions, many demolitions, unfortunately, including the large wraparound porch. And so with that, with additions, you want things to look very similar. So they had these huge wings added to the building. And they definitely painted it at that point too, if only to make the building with its new additions look more homogeneous. It simply is a aesthetic choice that was made, possibly functional. This building is over a century old. It has seen deterioration that regular maintenance would fix, and sometimes that regular maintenance is actually more harmful, such as painting the brick.